Welcome everyone to PHENOM, a demo series on the tool PHENOM. We are going to be talking today about data modeling for integration and face using PHENOM. And Chris Alport is here with us today. He will be taking us through that, through a number of the features within the tool that make data modeling for integration faster and easier. Chris is going to be sharing his screen, and he is going to be taking us through a number of different features within PHENOM, from model import through to model export. He's going to be talking a little bit about model merging, some semantic matching, some of our HealthCheck features, and making edits in the models. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Chris.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for making some time to be here with us today. As we look to prepare today's demo, we were trying to think of what is a meaningful workflow that we could go through that would, help you guys understand what we're trying to accomplish here a little bit better. And although there are lots of features within the tool that we could show you, we wanted to try to create a modeling workflow or some sort of modeling activity that actually made some sense. And we don't have a whole lot of time to teach data modeling. So what we're going to do is mechanically go through some of what we can do with data modeling. And we'll talk about those things as we go. We've talked in the past a little bit about PHENOM. PHENOM is built for purpose or fit for purpose data modeling tool. And we have strived to build a product that keeps your data models completely glued together as you do edits to them over time. So today what we're going to look at is we're going to start with a .face file. We're going to import that into PHENOM. And then we're going to see if we can use our health checks to get that data model face aligned and get it as close to conformant as possible within the tool. And then we're going to merge in another model. And then we're going to see what that does to the existing model. And we're going to try to get it back to a conformable state. Along the way, we're going to look at some of our semantic matching tools. And we'll also use some of the diagram tools to build a new view. And we'll wrap up with doing some exports. And I'll show you that we can export Face 2.1 and Face 3.0 files directly from this model without any additional work to get those different versions. So let's get started here. I've already logged into my account in PHENOM. And once you log in, you're usually dropped into your dashboard page, which gives you a lot of statistics on your current model. Now, currently I have a very large model loaded. That's not the one we're going to use for this discussion today. So what we're going to do is go over to our Manage tab here, and I'm going to load a new model. So we'll call that the command model. And I'm going to select that face file from right here, tiny model commands. And then we'll click Create. Now, part of what PHENOM does is it allows us to manage multiple models at the same time. And we can even put multiple models together in a single file. So much like when you're doing software development, or if you do software development, you have many, many different source files. You put those together into a single project or a single solution. We have a similar process here within PHENOM. So we've successfully loaded the command model, and now we have to create a project for it. So I'm going to call this the demo project. And we have to select which models are going to be a part of that project. So for now, we're just going to go with command model, click Create, and PHENOM's going to build that project for us. Now, these two tabs that I just used, the model creator and project creator, they let us create the content. Now we need to switch to the content. We have to communicate to the tool, well, I want to switch which model or which project I'm using. So I'll go back to the project manager, which is the default tab for our manage mode here. And I'll click switch. And now we're currently looking at the demo project model. If I go back to the dashboard, we see it's a significantly reduced bit of information, and that'll let us get through things a little bit quicker for the demonstration. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to take a look at the model and see what kind of a health state this model is in. Are there any big problems that we have to deal with before we start doing additional work on this model? Some of the things that can happen is we can have, if you import a phase 2.1 model, you can have bad paths. We can have some weird containment issues. And then there are some more subjective type things we can check on, like entity and attribute or observable uniqueness. So when we run our health check on this model, we get 2 issues, and basically says that we have this piston entity and a baseline no paths entity with no unique identifier. Well, okay, that's easy to fix. I'll just go ahead and click this button. It adds a unique identifier to all those for me. And we'll run the health check again. And we have 0 issues. Well, that's great. We don't have any problems reported in the model. Well, I want to show you one thing that's a little bit weird that we do in Phenom. It's a little non-intuitive, and we're working on some redesigns for this right now. But let's look at this face SDM conformance. And if we expand that, we see that there is no conformance indicated for these 2 shared data models. Now, we are currently using Skyhook, which is our public release only server. And notice that's the only reason we have these 2 versions of the SDM on here. If there were additional versions of the shared data model approved for public release, we could include those here. And for our distro D users on the other server, you will find a much longer list of shared data models available to you. So for now, we're going to look for conformance to 2.1.35. So we'll look at the list of issues that we have. And it turns out that we only have one issue, and that's a temporary observable. So apparently we were doing some modeling in this file and we created a temporary observable. So let's go get rid of that. And right there, double click on it and I can delete it. And Phenom's going to allow me to delete this observable and not just deprecate. We will see something later where we're only allowed to deprecate. So we'll go ahead and hit delete. I'm going to go back to run my health check once more. And we see that although it says it's 1 issue identified, and this is why I said that there's a little bit of a non-intuitive aspect to this feature. What it's showing us here when we drill down into face conformance is that we do have conformance to the 2.1.35 shared data model. So the model's pretty clean right now. And now I'm going to pollute it by merging in another model. So one question might be, why would you want to merge in another model? So what we had done is we took this model and we split out commands and statuses. So the model that I imported initially has a whole bunch of command views, and the model we're going to merge in has a bunch of status views. So we can get them all in one model. And it could be that folks in your team were doing modeling in different packages and they just didn't share the content as they went along. So we'll go back to the Manage tab, and I'm going to click on this button for Naive Merge. This is a really great tool. I use this all the time to bring in additional model content. I use it to upgrade my shared data models. I use it for a little bit of everything. And with the options here, it can do a lot for us. So essentially what we do is a very quick analysis of the model, and we see what things we can add into our existing model that isn't there. And we also check to see if we want to overwrite content or if there's a name collision. Now, since we're already going to load a model that has the same shared data model, or at least comparable information as the commands file, I'm going to turn off check for name collision. I don't care if there's a name collision. I'm not going to overwrite my content. So from here, we'll click merge. And what Phenom's going to do is upload this status model and try to merge it into the current demo project that we're already running. Now, if this operation fails, Phenom will give you an error message, and it will not change your model at all. This is effectively an atomic operation. It's all or nothing. You will either get a merged model or you won't. So let's go back to our health check again. Let's see what state our model is in. Okay, so our SDM conformance has gone away, and we have some name collisions. So let's just click through these and see if there's something we can do to resolve them. Okay, we'll start with this unique identifier. Well, this is an unofficial. So we were apparently doing some data modeling, and we had some non-shared data model based observables. So let's just go ahead and delete this guy. I can't delete it. So typically, when this dialog pops up, it's going to say deprecate, delete, or cancel. Well, right now it shows that this instance of unique identifier is being used by something. So it's not going to let me delete it. It's only going to let me deprecate it. And that's okay. We'll be able to come back and take care of it in a bit. What I want to do before deprecating is I'm going to rename it to just be old. Now, this is not something you have to do, but it's something that's a little bit helpful to do, and you'll see why in just a second. So now I'm going to go ahead, delete it, or sorry, deprecate it. Let's go back and see what our next model problem is. So we have a position. There's this unofficial. So same thing as the unique identifier. We'll click delete. And as I was expecting for unique identifier, we have the deprecate, delete, and cancel. So we're just going to go ahead and delete this option. And finally, we can look at volume. Same thing. We have an unofficial observable. Click delete. Okay, I can't delete. I can only deprecate. So once again, I'm going to rename this to be old, save it, and then we'll deprecate it. Okay. Now, quickly we'll run the health check again. And Phenom has come back and said, well, you've got some deprecation issues now. Well, okay, we just created them by deprecating things. So it's telling us that you are now using deprecated content in your model. So I'm going to click this little wrench, which is a shortcut for what we call a fix-up tool. Click that, and you see our current observable is volume old. That's because we renamed it. And it says assign a new observable. All right. The reason I renamed it is so we can more easily discriminate between the good volume and the old volume. In a very soon release of Phenom, there will be an icon beside the deprecated observables in this list. So I'm going to choose that volume, click save, and we'll go to the next fix up. And it's the same thing for unique identifier. We'll just choose the other unique identifier. All right. Run the health check again. And we have one problem, and that's with attribute uniqueness. And Piston has some duplicated unique identifier. One thing we can look at is whether or not this attribute is used in our documentation. And it isn't, since projectors is empty. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw away that one. And we'll come back here and run our health check once more. And we have 0 issues, but we're not reporting that we're happy with our 2135. So let's take a look here and see what's going on. So we have these old observables that were non-standard, and once again we adopted the temporary observable. Now we deleted that previously, but we got it back when we imported and merged that status model. So let's go back here to our edit or navigate mode. And here's the package containing all of these observables. I'm just going to throw the entire package away. Notice that I have the delete option, which means that these items are no longer being used, and I'm free to delete them. And we'll go back to generate, run HealthCheck one more time. And it looks like we're happy with our shared data model once again. Now, you may notice that I'm using a HealthCheck pretty often, and that's because it's really quick and it lets me do very frequent checks of my model, and I can very quickly iterate and make sure that the model is getting better and better. When the HealthCheck is slower, we have to be far more careful about making our changes, making the right change. We can't go back and see what the impacts of our change are. So now we have a model with our statuses and our commands built in or loaded. I'm going to go back to navigate mode. This is typically where we do most of our editing and exploring of the model. And I'm just going to grab the first view I see, which is engine speed command. And we'll take a look here. These are very simple views. One attribute here, it's speed. And you see that it has a path or a perspective. This is essentially the semantics. This is what this attribute represents in our data model. So in this case, the speed here is the angular velocity of the engine. What I want to do here now is I want to show you a feature we call matchy match. We like to have a little bit of fun here. Can't be too serious about everything. And if we look at matchy match for speed, it's going to tell us that we have a corresponding match in the engine speed status view. And the match is 100%. And what that means is that the documented attribute in engine speed status has the exact same path or perspective as this attribute. So we can match those up one for one. And the idea is that the engine speed command is talking about the exact same speed as the engine speed status. So we have a good match between those two things. Now, what if you're doing some modeling and you don't have a complete match? Do you have something close? So here's an example here. We have an aircraft engine speed status. Well, maybe engine speed command didn't also specify the context of the aircraft. It only said engine angular velocity. Well, could you possibly align that to the aircraft engine? Well, yes, it's possible. It's not exactly the same semantic, but when you're trying to look at integration, it might be close enough. Now, we're not going to address that in this view. We'll be able to address that elsewhere in PHENOM. Let's go and take a look at view traces. This is a really simple tool that gives us another picture of what we were looking at a second ago in the details editor. And I've pulled engine speed command in again. We're going to pull up the matchy match. And this gives us a list, that same list that we just saw. And I'm going to pull in engine speed status. Now, when I do that, it drops it over here on the right side for us. And it gives it a blue color. And the idea here is that we're trying to integrate two different systems, or we're trying to make A talk to B. So we just colorize things just to help give us a visual distinction. Now, I can drop a few different views in here, grab a corresponding matchy match, and you see that we're matching essentially commands and status. But we don't have a really, really interesting view. So let's go create. And for that, I'm going to use the diagram editor. And in this tool, we can certainly view entities. Let me grab a couple here. Let me throw the car in here. And then we'll add the engine. There we go. And let's drop the aircraft in here as well. Great. So we can use this to do general entity editing, and we can look at the relationships between things. We can also add new properties to our elements in here. So let's drag in an observable. Let's give the car an angle. There we go. Okay. But I really came here to build a view. And we're going to try to grab a couple of different perspectives on angular velocity. So let's drag new view. This. Okay. We'll double click and we'll say new path. And now it's just going to ask us to start picking out our path. So the first thing we'll grab is the car's engine's speed. And then it'll prompt us to complete the documentation for that attribute. And it's going to suggest a measurement for us. If we look at the list of measurements in PHENOM, we currently have real revolutions per minute and angular velocity, which is probably in radians. So I'll go with RPMs. And we'll look to see if a platform type already exists for us. And it does. We have a double and a float. I think a float's good enough. So we'll confirm that there. I want to add another speed. And in this case, we'll add the aircraft engine speed. And we can choose the same measurement and the same precision here as well. Finally, let's add one more, and we'll just directly grab the engine speed. And this should be some of the cases that we saw when we looked at match earlier. And just to be different, let's choose the angular velocity there. Let's choose float and confirm. Okay, so without having to know a lot of details about the paths or how to construct a path or the semantics for each one of these attributes, we did it just by clicking through the modeling and saying, you know, this is the car's engine's angular velocity. Well, one of the uses of this diagram tool is as just a scratch pad. In fact, the original name of this tool was Scratchpad, because we do a lot of modeling. We want to visually see or just try to work out ideas. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So before we leave this page, we want to commit these changes to our model. Once committed, they are put into our model and we can go do other operations on them. So let's go back to the view trace tool. So now it's giving us another warning saying, well, you're navigating away from the diagram. Well, we've already committed all of the model information. This is just telling us that we haven't saved the diagram, and that's okay. I don't need to save this diagram. So we'll go ahead and continue. We'll go back to the view trace, and I'm going to drag in this all speeds now. And notice it already found that we had these matches up for these two semantics, and it went ahead and created those matches for us. Now, finally, for car engine speed, we didn't have anything in there. We'll note that we have two options here. We can connect to the status or the command. I think we'll just go ahead and choose the status. And it went ahead and completed that map for us. Now, this tool is not necessarily saying that all speeds match to these messages or anything. It's not doing any mapping for us. This is purely an analytical tool. So you can work out how semantics of different views could connect to one another. Now, I'm going to remove this one from the display for a second and this one from the display. And I just want to focus on this for a second. I'm wanting to move these around to make it easier to understand. Okay. Now, one of the things that we talk about a lot at Skayl is that the interface is not the message. So when you start thinking about building your applications, if this is the interface of one of your applications. And it actually expects to receive 3 different speeds. And somewhere else in your application or somewhere else in your integration, you have these 3 distinct semantics. It is still possible to bring these 3 distinct semantics together to communicate with this application that expects all speeds, right? So what we're doing, part of the workflow that we're doing here is we're seeing if we have sufficient coverage of the semantics in this application with other views or other sources of information in our system. So far, we've imported a model, we've checked it for validity, we've merged in a different model, and we've worked that through to validity. We've done some matching on the semantics to see what attributes of our interfaces are talking about similar things. And then we use the diagram tool to build out a new view. Well, what if you want to get content out of PHENOM? You want to go run CTS or check your model in CTS. So we can go to the Generate tab. This is the same place we go for our HealthCheck. We'll go to Model Gen, and we have a number of different products we can export. So for now, I just want to focus on Phase 2.1 and Phase 3.0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and generate and download 2 files, and then I'll bring them up in a text editor and pull those onto the screen. When I open them directly in my text editor, they have a red hue because they're read-only. So I'm going to save the file there. I'll save this one as well. Okay. All right, here we go. So it's an eye chart because these are the canonical form of your data model. And this is the face XMI. But the reason we're looking at this is not because I want you to be impressed that we can generate XMI. What I want you to see is the fact that we can get to Face 3.0 queries and templates without having to write queries and templates in PHENOM. So I need to go back and look at PHENOM for a second. Let's see. Choose a simpler view. Engine speed. So let's look for engine speed command. Okay. And we have a platform view. Engine speed command, it has 1 characteristic. So let's look for that over here. Okay. We have a query. We go ahead and wrap that text. And you'll see that what we did here is our engine speed command. So our projected characteristic in this case would point to engine, and it has a very simple path pointing to its angular velocity. So we have a very comparable query here where our entry point here is the engine, and we choose in the engine the angular velocity. And since we chose the same measurement, you see that the name expansion was the same. Okay. And then elsewhere in this file, we do have a template right here. So it generates a default template for us. So again, without any additional work, we were able to generate a face query and a template that corresponds to the views and interfaces we had in Phase 2.1. So for the most part, that's a pretty complete overview of this workflow. And I guess it would be a great time to start taking some questions.
Absolutely. I have a few questions we're going to go ahead and get started with. Someone's asking, how does PHENOM's HealthCheck compare to the FACE CTS?
Good question. Because of some of the built-in modeling enforcement in PHENOM, we don't bother checking for those things, mainly because it's not possible to get to some of those invalid model structures. That said, there are a number of different checks that we have. Some of them exceed what the CTS does. For instance, path traceability actually traces out the paths, whereas in CTS for 2.1, it only checks to make sure that the different parts of a path are the correct type of element, meaning that it is a participant, it is a role name, it is an entity. It doesn't necessarily check that they're all connected. Obviously, CTS does not check deprecation issues. For the most part, it checks the rest of the things that we check. We always check for entity uniqueness and attribute uniqueness.
Thank you, Chris. We have another question. I've heard the statement that data modeling in PHENOM can be faster than in common modeling tools. What experience or evidence do you have to support that statement?
Sure. So the reason we wrote PHENOM was because we did a lot of modeling for about 5 years in Enterprise Architect. And a lot of our time spent in EA was making sure that stereotypes were set up correctly. All of the elements were named correctly. We had everything lined up. So not only did we have to learn how to drive the tool, we also had to learn how to set up the data to accommodate the export tool. We have anecdotal evidence from customers where they've said that this has helped them model faster. I can give you one anecdote. This was from a class that we taught at Pax River. We were asked a similar question. And so I was demonstrating how to build a model in Enterprise Architect. And granted, I have many years of experience and getting a model, and in the process, I accidentally created a small error, and it took me 90 minutes to properly export the file and get it to pass CTS. In that time frame, one of my junior engineers was with me, and he got sick of watching me do it, so he turned around and did it in PHENOM, and he was done with the valid model in less than 15 minutes.
Super. We have a question about configuration management. What configuration management capability comes with PHENOM, and how is model configuration management handled?
So configuration management is a capability that we're very excited about. If we go back to, in the page where I was loading models, we have the ability to publish versions of the models right there. For each model, there is a publish button. I can pull that back up. So we'll go back here to the manage page, and we'll go into the model. And once I click on this command model, I can say publish right here. And we can come over here and say it's a version 1.0. And I can publish that. So now I have a read-only version 1.0 of this model. I am free to share 1.0, or we can continue to operate on this live model. The live model meaning this is like the tip of your change, of your software version control change tree. It's similar to that. That's one aspect of configuration management. We also have a complete, again, analogous to software version control. You have the ability to push and pull your changes. So what we can do, instead of sharing the model that I imported, so this command model here is the one that I specifically imported, we could actually create a branch of that, and we could share the branch. So then everyone I share it with is operating on a branch. And then they could push their changes back, and I can approve them to make sure that only approved changes are getting into our model. To share a model, we just go to our project manager, and we have a list of all of our users right here. I am PHENOM demo, so I can't change my permissions, but we have other user and yet another user. So I could give other user read access, and maybe yet another user write access. And once I save that, they're now able to read and write this model. Good question.
Thanks, Chris. How often are updates released? They're probably thinking about new features, but perhaps bug fixes as well.
Well, I'll go back to the homepage and I'll just do a slow scroll here. So internally, we run a 3-week sprint, and this primarily is focused on Phenom development along with all of our other work. New features and bug fixes are released roughly every 3 weeks, and they're documented on the dashboard for everyone to see.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for showing that to us. What is the workflow for round-tripping models with EA or Magic Draw?
Round tripping is currently an in-development feature. So we can fully round trip models that are created in Phenom. And part of the reason for this is that Phenom does not actively store the logical or platform entity models. We don't need to. And the only reason for doing so is for round tripability. The way that it works in Phenom, in order to have consistent model output, we deterministically generate our GUIDs. So this allows you to save a model multiple times from Phenom. And your logical entity model and platform entity models will always be generated with the same repeatable GUIDs. When those GUIDs are generated from another package like EA or Magic Draw, we cannot reconstitute those. We generate those. And up to this point, our workflow has not been to save them. We threw them away. Again, they weren't necessary. We understand and appreciate that our customers really want this. So we are working on getting full round tripability built into the tool. So we will be persisting additional data. It will not be exposed to the user interface, most likely. Because again, it's really good data for bookkeeping. It's great for model consistency, but generally not necessary to expose for additional user interaction.
And I believe we're currently working on some interfaces with Magic Draw right now. Is there any kind of a timeline that users could begin to see at work?
Honestly, it's not top of, I don't know which sprint we have it slated for. I know that it's in our 2021 product roadmap, but I don't know where it is.
Okay, so sometime in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. What forms of support are offered as a part of Phenom?
Do you mean versions of Phenom? Do we mean
user support?
Okay, we have direct email support for bugs. We interact directly with customers when bugs are reported and found. So we stay a pretty tight loop on that. We did trial Balloon service desk for a while, but with the volume we were receiving, we just found it was much better to directly interact with our customers. These are the tools that we use for executing our work. So, we are familiar in-house with the tools, and we're happy to provide training on them as needed. And if we're working with customers, we use Phenom to complete our work. If you need help, we can always have any number of different consultation agreements that we can engage with you to help you use the product better. Also, we're kind of excited about this. I think Sonia is releasing some content next week. We are putting out tutorials that are like 5 to 10 minute tutorials that show you how to do different things in Phenom. In the last few months, I've recorded several videos with customers. I've sent them the videos, and their comments have been that they return to the video to remember how to do different things that I showed them in Phenom. So we've gone back and started creating videos for all of these different point workflows, like the things we did today with merging models, with doing a workflow to get it to pass a shared data model. those kinds of videos will be posted over the next several months.
I believe with any new Phenom users, we also do provide tool training as well as a data modeling or data architecture training as well, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. In fact, I say we've had a lot of very positive feedback from our customers who use Phenom on how supportive our team is. We actually have engineers who can get online with them right away and a lot of times help to resolve their issues. As Chris mentioned earlier, if there's ever a bug that's holding somebody up, or sometimes even a feature that somebody needs that is something that we can insert into the sprint, we always try to take care of that as quickly as possible and be very responsive to our customers as well. I do have another question. Will this work with Phase 3.1 models? If not, is there a roadmap to Phase 3.1?
Right now, we do have the ability to export Phase 3.1. So if I go back to the model gen, that's this option right here. Now, I'm not sure how robust our Phase 3.1 import is. So when I'm doing model imports, that is very resilient. Notice I didn't have to choose what kind of import. It ingested whatever file I gave it, Phase 2.1 or Phase 3.0. It doesn't support Phase 3.1 now. It will soon. There's very, very, very little difference in the Phase 3.1 format. So we will be supporting that again, if not now, very soon.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And actually, that goes back to Chris is here doing the demo. He says we use Phenom regularly. I know Chris uses Phenom on a regular basis, but this kind of goes back to the rate at which we put out new features in those 3-week sprints. In terms of sometimes, Chris even himself being unsure of whether or not that was just released or is soon to be released. Thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And if you have additional questions, please just let us know. You can contact us on our website, skayl.com. You can email us at sales@skayl.com. Or if you know any of us individually, of course, you can certainly do that as well. We do have a few upcoming webinars and demos that you might be interested in. We have Architect and Integrator, our newsletter and informational webinars, and part of our webinar series. We have Putting Face on Contract, Requirements and Considerations, coming up July 28th. We have another Phenom demo, Generating Integration Code, on August 11th. We have a webinar, Safety Certification and the Face Technical Standard, on Wednesday, September 1st. And again, feel free to reach out to us, or you can also go to skayl.com Conformance to schedule a free face alignment gap analysis or a personalized demo. Everybody have a fantastic day.